Ever since his first appearance in FNAF 1, fans have been trying to uncover the nature of Golden Freddy and his strange abilities. Somehow, however, a seemingly simple explanation has been overlooked all this time. I won't make you wait for the point, but I do ask that you give me the opportunity to explain it. Golden Freddy's additional abilities are purely the result of agony, and don't actually have as much to do with how many different kids' spirits are inside of him as they do with what kind of and how much energy he's gathered. This theory isn't altered by whether both Dave and Cassidy inhabit the suit, or only Dave. It also doesn't change if it's someone besides Cassidy that's the vengeful spirit. The only necessity for this theory is the presence of agony and that lasting imprint of the bite. The agony could be a result of the bite, but it doesn't have to be and probably isn't. I don't think that Dave is the vengeful spirit, and I do think the vengeful spirit has its own agony. For that to be the case, the agony can't only come from the bite. As we've seen before in the books, agony has this tendency to seek out and hoard spiritual energy. It's violent by nature and can twist and warp things it infects. When the man from room 1280 explodes in the warehouse at the end of his story, the agony that's released infects several different objects stored inside. On top of that, we have Eleanor, a reoccurring character in the stories that is clearly a corrupted agony being that seems to feed on people's negative emotions and traps their spirits in the ball pit from Into the Pit, which, in turn, seems to fuel the existence of the Rabbit Entity Pit Trap, though even that could be Eleanor in disguise. All of these agony-infused objects go on to continue performing their functions, but in a twisted, violent manner. For example, Fetch, an animatronic dog designed to retrieve objects for its owner, brings a disembodied finger and even, probably, a corpse, when its owner desires the company of the people that the finger and body belonged to. The objects from the warehouse aren't the only things linked to agony in the books, and the common thread between the others appears to be Eleanor, who seems to be able to track agony-infused items. Some of these objects were created by her, while the actions of others are facilitated by Eleanor. In Step Closer, Foxy seemingly curses the main character to lose an eye and an arm, and later, in the Stitch Wraith Stingers, Eleanor is shown holding Pete's spirit into his body after he's dead, so that he has to experience the post-mortem loss of his eye and arm to his status as an organ donor. The Ella doll from 1:35 a.m. is assisted in waking Delilah by Eleanor, shown at Delilah's window in agony memories that Larson gets trapped in during the Stingers. In these memories, Larson also sees Eleanor creating the plush trap chaser that would terrorize the children in Out of Stock. She alters the toy by inserting real human eyes and teeth into the doll. She's actually revealed to be responsible for most of the terrible things that happen in the Fazbear Frights books, and has acquired an alarming amount of agony to fuel her abilities. She's incredibly strong by the time Larson and Jake face off against her, and they barely manage to stop her from claiming her prize, a bunch of remnant. Throughout the stories, she works to acquire as much spiritual energy as she can, finding different methods to squeeze agony out of her victims. At one point, she uses this energy to amalgamate all of the agony-infused items that Jake had gathered to dispose of. Without Jake's actions, they wouldn't have been there, but they'd still be out causing harm in the world. I say specifically Jake because Andrew, the other spirit in the Stitch Wraith, didn't want to gather them. He was too angry to want to do good and was attached to a source of agony, if not a source of agony himself. Without Jake, he'd probably have fallen to the influence of this agony way beforehand. Eleanor lends her power to Afton and assists him in creating and inhabiting the amalgamation, but, in the end, is unwilling to die for him. She escapes as the puppet moves in to destroy the monstrosity. We know she escapes, and the agony amalgam crumbles apart into the lake beside the factory, including the puppet and presumably Andrew, who goes missing from the Stitch Wraith when Afton moves to inhabit the amalgamation. I know that was a lot of talk about Fazbear Frights, but I wanted to give some proper context for the agony abilities I'll be mentioning. We learned from all of this that agony can grant the abilities to create hallucinations, teleport, kill things by touching them, infect other objects with agony, move a person's consciousness into a weird agony dream world while keeping their body alive, track other infected objects and draw them to itself, invade the mind, and more. With enough agony, one can even create physical manifestations, like Eleanor does with the weird black blood tendrils. These are some very interesting abilities, especially when you look at Golden Freddy's powers and his behavior in the games, alongside all of the new information found in the week before. First, let's take a look at the abilities. Golden Freddy can obviously teleport around and causes the player to hallucinate "it's me." He's connected to the strange dream hallucination of the Golden Freddy suit coming into the party room to find Ralph, and his methods of killing Ralph all involve messing with Ralph's mind, whether that's to cause him to give away his location to the other animatronics, or to subdue Ralph as he kills him himself. All it takes to finish Ralph off is Golden Freddy touching him. Not forcefully, mind you. The phrasing states that Golden Freddy puts his hands on either side of Ralph's head. Ralph already had a bloody nose from the mental assault before the physical contact, and, once it occurs, it's lights out pretty quickly for Ralph. We learn another thing in this instant, however. Bronwyn's spirit is within the entity. Her voice breaks through to comfort Ralph in his final moment, assuring him that his daughter is safe. It's unclear in this ending if that's enough to save Ralph from being trapped here as well, but I don't think that answer matters. We know the canon ending, and this one isn't it. The canon ending is the one where Ralph never learns Bronwyn was there, because instead of checking the voicemail, Ralph leaves us the final message we hear in FNAF 1, the message he dies to make, with a thinly veiled plea for help and a promise to try to hold out. After the attack, Ralph comes to in the repair shop behind the stage. He can't move his head, but he can see the room through the eye holes of the suit he's inside of. At first, he's confused, thinking that he might be okay, but he isn't. He realizes he can't move at all, and that he's emitting a putrid smell. He decides to wait, probably hoping the next night guard will be able to save his life. There's just one small problem with that. He's already dead. Think about it. He's inside of a suit and can't move. His body is giving off a bad odor, implying rot. He should be injured, but his internal monologue suggests no pain. Ralph is a ghost, dead and trapped in the only whole suit there is backstage. Golden Freddy. Bronwyn's spirit became trapped inside of the bear when she was put inside, and now they've made room for Ralph. This isn't the work of a regular, slightly perturbed spirit in the form of remnant. This is agony. Agony collecting souls, collecting energy, a vengeful spirit bent on trapping their killer in an agony-fueled nightmare and refusing to let him die. Whether this vengeful spirit is Dave, Cassidy, Andrew, anyone really, the outcome is the same. An angry, agonized soul hoarding power to enact its revenge. But there's more. Reading through the week before, I found regular Freddy's characterization, along with the way the other animatronics interact with him, very strange. The others seem afraid of him. They cower and leave when he makes his presence known. They have no reaction to slights like destroying Chica's cupcake, and when he first wanders the restaurant, they won't even leave the stage. Where Chica, Foxy, and Bonnie might fight over Ralph amongst themselves, we don't see this attitude towards Freddy. But why? Why do they react so differently to Freddy? To answer that, we need to look at a few things. First, what can Freddy do? His abilities differ from the rest of the core four. Freddy is able to invade Ralph's mind, just like Golden Freddy. Not only does he have the ability, but he torments Ralph even when he doesn't have any reason to, visiting Capella even after successfully escaping, just to cause Ralph anguish. Freddy can cause the posters to change in the camera feeds during his and Ralph's staring contest, which is hinted to just be a hallucination in Ralph's head. At the end of the staring contest, they seem to swap bodies. At one point, Ralph gets the idea in his head that Freddy could potentially teleport right into his office, and thinks he's seeing Freddy teleport around on camera. His concern holds extra weight considering Ralph's near psychic levels of intuition when it comes to the truth about these animatronics throughout the book. If Ralph calls the cops on that final night instead, he's thrown into a paranoid state that lasts for the rest of his life. These abilities seem much more like those originating from Agony than from Remnant. But why? And how do the other animatronics even know? Can they sense it? If they can, then why act so afraid when he doesn't seem to pose any real threat to them? Could it be that he wasn't always like this? What if Freddy and the spirit inside started off just like Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, but became different later on? How might this have happened? Let's count the ways. There are a few options as to how he got infected with Agony. Golden Freddy might have done it purposefully to widen his sphere of influence. But if he was willing to do that, then I don't know why he wouldn't infect the others. Another option is that the agony just kind of leaks out of Golden Freddy, poisoning everything in the vicinity. While I do think that happens to an extent, it wouldn't be to the level seen in Freddy and should be affecting the others as well. It doesn't explain why Freddy's more infected, so no dice. What does explain it, dear viewer, is a simple repair gone wrong. You see, something must have happened to spark Ralph's sudden desire to leave after so many years of faithfully serving the company, and what would get the urgency across better than the disappearance of yet another security guard? Especially if they asked Ralph to cover those nights before his decision to resign. Yes, it explains both the sudden vacancy and Ralph's desire to leave, but it explains more than that. It gives us a direct reason that the animatronics would start behaving so differently the second Ralph was moved to nights. The previous guard used a part from the old spare Freddy sitting in the back in order to repair the band's leading man, and got himself killed in the process. Perhaps his death even fed further into the agony surrounding Golden Freddy. With this, our vengeful spirit in the Golden Freddy suit has exhibited nearly every agony-based ability, and will go on to do more. Golden Freddy is Pizza Sim's loose thread as well. The suit was never taken to the sister location bunker to join the others as a part of the fun times. It was never mentioned by Henry in his plans. Golden Freddy was forgotten. Golden Freddy didn't burn. Even if the fire could destroy both Agony and Remnant for sure, forever, guaranteed, which isn't guaranteed, it doesn't matter if the suit wasn't there. At least, it wasn't physically there. Agony-infested objects can be bound and drawn to each other, remember? After being spring-locked and sealed away in a room for what must have felt like an eternity, I imagine Afton likely felt a little bit of agony. That's not to mention the presence of this fifth, particularly vengeful, spirit during the spring locking. Did you think Afton really managed to survive on his own? In the Follow Me minigames from FNAF 3, the core 4 animatronics, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, must all be led to the safe room by Shadow Freddy. This is due to the animatronic programming preventing them from pathing to the room. After failing to enter, Afton is able to swiftly dismantle each of them. On the 5th night, however, needing no guide, the spirit of a child makes their way to the safe room. Together, the children's spirits advance towards Afton, sending him into a panic. In a last, mad, desperate act, Afton jumps into the old, damp Spring Bonnie suit, believing it might save him. It doesn't. You may have already figured out my intention to connect Shadow Freddy's form with the Agony ability to manifest physical, black tendrils as shown in the books. But I imagine you're also wondering why he would help Afton to dismantle the others. The answer is simple. He wasn't doing it to help Afton. Based on Afton hiding out in the safe room and jumping to attack when their back turns, these animatronics pose a real threat to him. Once the Core 4 all fail to subdue Afton, the vengeful spirit shows up himself. I don't think they expected Afton to get himself spring-locked, but how fortuitous it was. And then, when the company sealed the room to cover up the events, it got even better. The vengeful spirit had Afton all to themselves, in a special hell that Afton himself created. The spirit would use its abilities to deny Afton an end to his suffering. Believing Afton was undeserving of the peace that death might bring, the vengeful spirit kept him alive in that dark little room. Until one day...
You're not gonna believe this. We found one. A real one.
With that, Springtrap was finally released. He'd been infused with enough of his own and the vengeful spirit's agony to truly become one with his new form. He relished in his newfound freedom, easily escaping the fire that would consume the horror attraction before eventually following the call of an old friend to none other than Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place. It was there that Henry had decided to put an end to everything. He crafted Lefty to secure the spirit of his own daughter, and sent out a false call to lure in William, Elizabeth, and the twisted fusion of funtime animatronics known as Molten Freddy. Henry had done his due diligence. Realizing the remnant had been stolen away, he traced it to the bunker and realized how they'd been used. But he hadn't found everything. Somewhere out there in some dark corner, the vengeful spirit waited for another opportunity to continue his vengeance against Afton. And when Henry finally set the animatronics ablaze, the spirit latched onto Afton as strongly as it could. This time, Afton wouldn't escape. The vengeful spirit was determined not to let him escape again. William Afton could not be allowed to rest. Even the possibility of Afton finding peace was an affront to all the suffering that the vengeful spirit had endured, that everyone had endured because of him. The spirit would trap Afton in the agony-infused nightmare that we know as Ultimate Custom Night, and would never, ever let him leave. That was, at one point, probably the end of it, but it isn't now, so let's continue. What becomes of the vengeful spirit after the pizzeria simulator fire? What effects does their keeping Afton alive potentially have? We know that Glitchtrap came to be, based on the Mimic program, but how much of this was learned AI behavior as opposed to being influenced by Afton and the vengeful spirit's agony? How attached might that iteration of the Mimic software be to the real William Afton? And what of Burntrap? Is this influenced by the agony? Or is it just some strange learned behavior of the Mimic? We still have a lot of questions, and we still have the Tangle. The Tangle is an angry amalgamation of animatronic parts and pieces held together by dark tendrils, cables, wires. Wait a minute. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? It's oddly similar to the agony creature that Eleanor escaped from in the Stitch Wraith Stingers, the one that both Afton and the book's vengeful spirit seem to end up in before the addition of the puppet brings it down. Except this amalgamation doesn't bear Afton's face. It bears Freddy's. Is the vengeful spirit the basis for the Tangle? Could anything else be? The way the Tangle slurps up Burntrap and Security Breach certainly implies some level of disdain. Burntrap doesn't even really need to be Afton to earn the Tangle's ire. After so many years of blind hatred, the similarity is likely enough. The additions he seems to have gathered over the years were likely in an attempt to acquire more and more agony and remnant to continue fueling Afton's personal hell. Now, this isn't meant to solve everything, and it certainly doesn't, but it can answer some questions. The vengeful spirit purposefully gathering souls and energy in preparation to retaliate against Afton explains the oddities surrounding Golden Freddy in the games and in the week before. The effects of agony explain the things he can do and what might set Freddy apart from Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, as well as giving a potential origin to Shadow Freddy. The spirit's aversion to allowing William to rest gives a tangible reason for him to live through being spring-locked and trapped in a room with no food or water for so long. Golden Freddy not being burned in the pizzeria simulator fire sorts out how the spirit could resist moving on and trap Afton in Ultimate Custom Night. And, finally, the need to continue to gather more and more energy to fuel Afton's torture offers an explanation of how the Tangle came to be. With that said, I want to say thank you to my channel members, Ballsfrog and Empress. I'll see you guys in the next one, and have a
That's a terrific day.